Hey guys, today I'm going to be checking out something from Halo, and anytime I'm doing Halo, I have somebody with me, and that will be Arco.
Hello.
And Luis Almanza wanted to take a look at what the Flood would look like fully realized as an outbreak. And this was covered by Halo Canon. So, we're going to get into this. We're going to check this out. This is going to be potentially horrifying, but at the same time, I have SCP-999 behind me, and I think I'll be fine. I think I'll get over it. Arco, do you have anything before we begin on this one?
Ah, ah, the Flood are the embodiment of what it would look like if Nurgle and Malice / Malal were to team up.
No. Well, guys, and especially if you want something seen as far as Halo goes, field is short right now, so go ahead and put something in. In any case, let's get into this. Here we go.
Oh. Welcome back, Canonites. Ever since we were introduced to the Flood in one of gaming's greatest reveals, fans have pondered and theorized about the alien parasite. Halo CE tells us that the only way to stop the Flood is to starve them to death, and while this statement leaves out some important context, it is technically correct.
The best kind of correct.
Which makes one wonder, what happens when the Flood infect an entire galaxy? What happens when they run out of biomass to absorb? Can they continue to propagate, or will they starve? And if they starve, how long will that take? Today we'll dive into a minor exploration of how the Flood operates, touch on parts of the parasite's history, then finally explore what a transgalactic Flood outbreak might look like. When the Flood are unleashed, they go through 4 unique stages of development, starting with the feral stage. At the onset, the Flood are mostly basic infector forms such as the traditional pod infectors and spores. These forms seek out victims to infect, converting any viable sentient life into combat forms. Over time, or if a combat form is severely damaged, they'll be transformed into carrier forms, filled with...
So, the carriers, the purveyors of the feet picks, they were the ones that had already been damaged at some point in battle, and they just evolved into that.
Yes, and if the host itself was already particularly weak or not suited for combat, it could also be made into one as well.
That makes sense.
With pod infectors ready to infect new hosts. With no central intelligence, the Flood can only perform basic communication via pheromones and instinctually begin harvesting bodies, particularly those with high amounts of calcium, to construct a compound mind. This is the Flood as we encounter it in Halo CE and, to an extent, Halo Wars.
Okay.
The feral stage is rather unique compared to the later stages, as there is a rather long road from the start of a Flood outbreak to reaching its next stage. In essence, the feral stage is anything prior to the appearance of a fully realized Gravemind. To use a brief if unorthodox metaphor, the Flood stages of growth are kind of like Super Saiyan transformations.
Okay.
When Goku, Vegeta, Trunks, and Gohan were trying to unlock a new form of Super Saiyan in the Cell Saga, they had to go through several different quote-unquote grades of Super Saiyan before Gohan unlocked what later became known as Super Saiyan 2. And then all transformations after that were basically just additional power-ups. Flood infestation is kind of similar, with the jump from feral to coordinated requiring several in-between steps, and later stages just kind of upping the existing scales. As bodies are accumulated, Flood supercells, the most basic form of the Flood and the key to the Flood's adaptability, will convert these bodies into Flood biomass, forming command and coordination forms known as keyminds. Keymind is a blanket term for any Flood form that aids in the parasite's coordination efforts.
Okay.
If a Flood hive cannot be established, lower command forms like the Juggernaut, a specialized combat form directed by a seething mass of infection forms and linked to multiple hosts, can grow into larger, smarter abomination keyminds, able to coordinate the Flood on a large scale while remaining in motion. Eventually, however, a central intelligence will take root, a proto-Gravemind. As this proto-Gravemind accumulates more biomass and intelligence while growing in size, the flood forms within its range will become more and more coordinated and effective. New, more powerful flood forms born entirely of raw flood biomass may appear as well, depending on the needs of the hive, present threats to it, and the size of the proto-gravemind itself. While we get glimpses of this advanced level of the Flood Feral stage in Halo Wars, and even Halo CE to a much lesser extent, it is best visualized in Halo Wars 2's Awakening the Nightmare DLC.
This Halo Wars looks a lot like StarCraft.
It is a bit. I think you'd enjoy it.
Oh, okay.
When a proto-gravemind reaches a critical mass, it will become self-aware and connect with the collective intelligence of the Flood, all the information it has ever possessed across time. At this point, the Flood enters the coordinated stage. With a fully empowered Gravemind directing them, the Flood become ever deadlier, utilizing not only the knowledge accumulated during the local infestation, but the total collective knowledge of the Flood. So, for any of you eager to meet the Primordial, we basically did back in Halo 2 and 3, the games where we encounter a coordinated Flood infestation. It's rather interesting too that the Flood's collective intelligence is ever present, like a corrupted version of the Domain, the information repository first either discovered or created by the Precursors, and later used by Forerunners.
Okay.
After a Gravemind is formed, the Flood will continue to spread across their environment, eventually completely converting everything it can find. We kind of get a glimpse of this in Halo 3, with the Flood outbreak on High Charity having grown large enough to completely cover it in Flood biomass. Inside and
Which is good and disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
seemingly out. Maybe that's just supposed to be the same dirt-like surface from Halo 2, but it looks like a huge mass of Flood material to me.
Yes, it does.
Anyway, once the Flood are able to take control of spacefaring technology or develop it themselves, they'll begin spreading among the stars, bringing them to the interstellar stage. This is the Flood as the Forerunners knew it, and ancient humans before them, where the Flood infested entire planets, converting them into a greater type of keymind. These planetary keyminds provided the Flood with extraordinary planning and strategic capabilities, and were said to even be a match for Medarch level Ancilla. For context, those were the most powerful AI the Forerunners had.
Huh.
The Intergalactic stage is as developed as the Flood have ever been witnessed in Halo's lore, but that's not where the Flood stops. It will spread and spread until all organic life within a given galaxy has been consumed, joining the eternal misery of the Flood's chorus. Once this has been achieved, the Flood will enter a theoretical fourth and final stage, Transgalactic. And this is where we have to get into speculation, as, again, this stage has never been witnessed, only theorized.
Okay.
If an entire galaxy were to fall to the Flood, what would happen next? And if the Flood had no more biomass to consume, what would it do? What would happen to it? To start, let's look at specifically how the Flood might begin to spread. The first thing we have to ask is whether any Flood would remain in the original infected galaxy, or would it all depart in different directions towards different galaxies? Would there be any value in remaining in a seemingly depleted galaxy?
Honestly, I think they'd spread out and go in all directions. That's just survival.
It honestly depends a lot on the motives of the Gravemind,
Right.
specifically, because, well, we don't know everything about it, but from what we understand, the reason the Flood came to be is specifically because the Forerunners betrayed the Precursors and slaughtered them.
Right.
Honestly, we can't say with any certainty here. Though, when the universe is still rich with life, I can imagine the Flood might decide to spread as completely as possible. If that's the case, then they might depart from the galaxy entirely, leaving only dead worlds, a dead galaxy, in their wake. I want to highlight a statement made by the Gravemind from Halo 3, in which it claims,
I have beaten fleets of thousands, consumed a galaxy of flesh and mind and bone.
While it may have been referring to the Flood's conquest of the Milky Way 100,000 years ago, it might equally be referring to something else. The Flood was first encountered over 111,000 years ago during a conflict between ancient spacefaring humans with their San Shayum allies and the Forerunners. The Flood would be beaten back by the humans in San Shayum, forced out of the Milky Way for 10,000 years before reappearing stronger and stranger than ever.
Lovely.
What might have happened in those 10,000 years? Could the flood have traveled to another galaxy, maybe Andromeda, and consumed an entire galaxy in almost 10,000 years? The precursors had some impressive technology, and the flood were highly coordinated even when they were first forced back. This was in truth a strategic feint, part of a larger plan. Might the galaxy our Milky Way is destined to collide with and merge with in a few billion years be a graveyard of barren empty worlds? Or might the flood be there, waiting to reach us the old-fashioned way? Might Andromeda be the starting point for a universal-scale flood infestation? Maybe one by one the distant galaxies of the universe are falling to the flood. Maybe
How about we not and say we did?
the Milky Way is the last bastion of independent sentient life. In case you ever needed a reminder about the flood being a cosmic horror, there you go. But, back on topic, whether the flood abandoned harvested galaxies entirely or not, there would come a point where the flood has consumed everything, or at least everything within its reasonable range. It's hard to say which would actually happen. The precursors had some stupid OP abilities. The Great Mind was even once able to reach into the fabric of reality itself and, with the aid of precursor technology, warp space-time. So whether the rate of galactic expansion would outpace what the Flood are capable of consuming, I can't say. Regardless, there would come a time when there was no more organic life to feast on, no new hosts to absorb, just the eternal flood. Unity and wisdom, as the Primordial once said. So, what would happen next? Would the flood simply begin to starve, or would it find a way to persist? And if it did just starve, how long would that take? I can easily see the flood finding a way to cheat death and...
I think the flood operates more like a virus than anything else.
Yeah.
And it would if it came down to it, wind up killing itself.
Potentially, although the Flood are still, well, at least the product of precursors, and the precursors could reincarnate on a whim, just because they wanted to. So,
Okay.
and continuing for untold eons, but if it had no choice but to starve, well, it might not be quick. In Halo Primordium, the second of the Forerunner novels, it takes 1 billion years worth of time to kill the Primordial, a new Gravemind at this point. However, this being was designed to survive deep time, altered by other precursors. If this trait is one the Flood is capable of, we do not know. However, the Flood's goal was never survival, just unity. A perverse, miserable unity, but unity nonetheless. After that's achieved, it may not care what happens next. Let the universe become a massive grave devoid of any life whatsoever. At least, for a good chunk of time. With that though, I think we can wrap up this discussion. The Flood is always a fascinating subject to discuss, from the basics down to the deep lore. Thank you for watching as always, stick around for the Patreon shoutout, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. First, I'd like to give a
Very nice. Very nice. What did you think, Arco?
good.
Good.
Yeah. Good.
This is kind of one of those things where it's sort of like we at least have the answer for the Tyranids. What would they do if they devoured all life in the Milky Way? They'd move on, or they'd just go into hibernation mode, which is what it seems like they were doing out there in the stars. That's what it seems like they were doing. They might have gone somewhere else. In fact, it's most likely they did head off to another galaxy. It would explain why they weren't showing up for so long. I mean, they were around 65 million years ago. But yeah. But it would be nice to get a little bit more information about what they did in the downtime, what the Flood had done in the interim, if there was any Flood anywhere else in the universe. But yeah, do you know anything about that, or were they all just stuck on the Halo ring?
It's a mystery.
Yes. Okay, so, well, the Flood. Nurgle and Malice had a baby and peed on it.
Yeah.
Nurgle and Malice had a baby and peed on it. That's what this is, apparently, even though Malice is not canon. In any case, Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. All of Halo Canon's links going to be in the description down below. And next to my own, including my PayPal, my Patreon, and Discord, so you guys can come in and throw rocks at me if you feel like it. If you are wondering how to make a request, that's a simple thing. Just jump into the Discord and look down at the request tabs. There are 6 of them. So come on in, drop yours down. I try to look at the most requested thing from each one every so often. Well, not every so often. Well, I go after the top request most times. And every once in a while I'll catch something that catches my eye and I'll want to check it out. In any case, I have been the old man. This has been the Arco.
Bye-bye.
Catch you guys next time. Have some fun, alright? Hit the button, you boomer!